Hello, everyone. Uh, we had trouble recording the first presentation of the summer class from Sunday. So this is our recording, a shorter version of it a few weeks later. That way it will be available to you if you go back and want to read and review all the slides from all the presentations. Now, at least the first one will be available to you. I'd like to start off by asking you a few questions. Since you are a record audience that doesn't exist right now, I will ask a question, give you a few seconds to think about it, and then I will continue. So the first question is, how much time elapsed between when the Israelites departed Egypt until they entered the promised land? Hopefully you came up with the answer of 40 years. So the follow-up question is, where did they spend this 40-year period? The answer can be found in multiple places in the Old Testament, but here's sort of a short version of it from Amos. And it was I who brought you up from the land of Egypt and led you in the wilderness for 40 years so that you might take possession of the land of the Amorite. And here is a map of their wanderings in the desert of Sinai. So now I'm asking you to pick one of three items. Which do you find to be the driest? The Sinai desert, the studies of math, or studying language? When we actually did the class live, it was split about one third, one third, one third on what people found the most dry. So we'll be spending not 40 minutes, we're going to be spending some time looking at math and language, but we eventually will get to the class topic. So beginning with the math desert. Do you have any idea what this represents? If not, how about this? Or maybe you recognize this. So there's an equation, there is a graph, and there is an example. So what is this an example of? What is that equation of? And hopefully somebody come up. We had various engineers in class and they got it. This is a parabola. There is a definition there from the wiki about what a parabola is. A curve formed by a plane intersecting a cone. And essentially, just go ahead and read the rest of that definition for yourself if you'd like. Real life examples, a bouncing ball, the arch of a bridge, and also a rainbow, are many examples of parabolas that we have in nature or manufactured by man. Now we'll go and look at language a little bit. The root word for both parabola and parable is the Greek word parabole, which means to compare or place side by side, coming from para, meaning beside or alongside, and bole, to throw or to cast. So again, from Wiki, a parable is a short story, teach a moral lesson. They're usually brief and straightforward, trying to make them easy to remember and to understand. Now, when is a parable not a parable? When it technically is a simile. Hopefully you remember what a simile is. I'll give you a second or two to think about that, of what is a simile, and do you have an example of one? A simile is a direct comparison of two things that are actually different, and often you'll see the word like, as, or so. An example being, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. Also, there's something called a metaphor, if you recall that from your high school English class. A metaphor is similar to a simile without the word like or as. So instead of saying something is like something, it says it is something. Example being, you are the salt of the earth. Finally, we have, again, from an English language point of view, something that is technically called an analogy, which is an extended metaphor which compares more things in different ways as opposed to a simple statement like you are the salt of the earth. An example of an analogy might be the sower and the seed and the types of ground. They're one parable, but they have many different things that are being compared. So regardless of if we're talking similes, metaphors, or analogies, what are these parables or parabole in Greek? We're going to consider them all parables from which we can learn, which finally leads us to the topic of the class, parabolic learning. From Matthew 13:34 through 35, all these things Jesus spoke to the crowds in parables, and he did not speak to them without a parable. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet, I will open my mouth in parables, I will utter things hidden since the foundation of the world. Class outline. Again, this was week 1, doing a preview. The next 9 weeks, we'll be looking at various parables. And then finally, a review at week 11 at the very end of August. But anybody who's been in my class before knows I like numbers. We're going to get out of the desert of math, but we are going to go on to the jungle of statistics. But it'll be short and not complicated. Here's the list of parables from Jesus. And we did a survey for the class. It was available to you via a link in email or in the bulletin with a QR code, where we asked you to pick up to 5 of your favorite parables. And also, what parables would you like to study in class? So I'm going to give you your replies. What are your favorites? There was a 2-way tie for 5th, the 10 virgins and the lost sheep. Coming in at 3rd was the wise and foolish builders. And we had a 2-way tie for 1st. I'm going to give you a chance here to think for a second. What do you think the top 2 favorite parables are? They are the Good Samaritan and the prodigal son. The other question was, what would you like to study in class? We had a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-way tie for 5th. You can see them there. Coming in 4th was the marriage feast. Coming in 3rd was the friend at midnight, which Alan Bobo just did this past Sunday. The cost of discipleship was something I did 2 weeks ago. And your number 1, I'll give you a second to take a guess, was the new cloth on an old coat or new wine in an old wineskin. And that is what Alan Bobo did week 2 of the class. What is this little table, this little chart am I trying to tell you? Essentially, if you look over at the far left, it says 45% of you had your 5 favorites and your 5 that you wanted for class. You had no overlap. So you wanted to study things that were not necessarily your favorite. Some of you wanted one of your favorites, some wanted a couple. But in either case, for the most part, the majority of you said, or more than anybody else said, let's study something that's not necessarily our favorites. Finally, one little tidbit of information. There was one parable that received no votes in either category, neither anybody's favorite nor anybody wanted to study in class. And that parable was the master and his servant. So hopefully Ricky, maybe in a sermon, or Sean, who is currently teaching the book of Luke on Wednesday nights, can address this lonely parable. Back to some questions for you. Do all 4 books of the gospel contain parables? Hopefully you said no, because the next question is, which of these 4 books contain no parables? That would be the book of John. Which book contains the most parables? That would be Luke. And are there parables in the Old Testament? Yes or no? The answer to that is yes. Because we have time, we did this in class and we certainly have plenty of time now, we're also going to do a parable as part of our week 1 preview, followed by a parable. An Old Testament mashal, or mashal, I'm not quite sure how that's pronounced, and I'll read this parable to you. You can see it on the screen. There were 2 men in one city, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had great many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb, which he bought and nourished. And it grew up together with him and his children. It would eat of his bread and drink of his cup, and lie in his bosom, and was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, and he was unwilling to take from his own flock or his own herd, to prepare for the wayfarer who had come to him. Rather, he took the poor man's ewe lamb and prepared it for the man who had come to him. Questions. Who told this parable, and to whom was it told? Hopefully you recognize it. It can be found in 2 Samuel chapter 12. The Lord sent Nathan to David, and he came to him and said the words we just read. Do you remember who Nathan is? He is mentioned several times, 2 Samuel a couple times, and in 1 Kings, as a prophet / advisor to David. And then finally, who is David? Hopefully you know that one. There's lots of different ways to describe David. What I came up with was from 1 Samuel. The Lord has sought for himself a man after his own heart, and the Lord has appointed him ruler over his people. I don't know too many people described like David was as a man after God's own heart. Yet, another question. How did David react to this parable? Second Samuel 12, 5 through 6. His anger burned greatly against the man, and he said to Nathan, as the Lord lives, surely the man who has done this deserves to die. He must make restitution for the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing and had no compassion. Deserves to die, make restitution, and has no compassion. Now, do you remember why David was told this parable? Well, Nathan reminds us in the next few verses. He said to David, you are the man. Thus says the Lord God of Israel. It is I who anointed you king over Israel. It is I who delivered you from the hand of Saul. I also gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your care, and I gave you the house of Israel and Judah. Why have you despised the word of the Lord by doing evil in his sight? You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword, have taken his wife to be your wife, and have killed him with the sword of the sons of Ammon. So as we discussed in class, the story, David first tried to get around it by lying to Uriah and hoping that he would think that he had impregnated Bathsheba. And then when he sent him out on the battlefield, he ordered the other men to withdraw from him so he would have no chance. So a great betrayal that David cast upon Uriah. It was followed by this pronouncement: Thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against you from your own household. I will even take your wives before your eyes and give them to your companion, and he will lie with your lives in broad daylight. Indeed, you did it secretly, as I mentioned before, but I will do this thing before all Israel and under the sun. How did David react to this pronouncement? He simply said, I have sinned against the Lord. And as Carrie Clark brought up in class, if you read Psalm 51, it was David's response later on to this situation. So, for your consideration, as we're winding up, we ask the questions: have you ever been in a position similar to Nathan's? Have you ever been in a position similar to David's? How can you imagine people normally react upon hearing, you are the man? And that was the end of class. And as mentioned earlier, we then proceeded to read the New Cloth and the New Wine, and they're written in three different books of the Gospel. So there is a review of the class that was not recorded successfully about a month ago. Hopefully this will be a good thing to get you up to date before you go on and watch the other presentations. I am done.
Thank you, Brother Jeff, for redoing that for us. Appreciate it.
So as far